Welcome to the 700 Club. Utter pandemonium. Thousands of Christians, Kurds, and Yazidis fleeing for their lives. Turkish forces blitzing northern Syria from the air and the ground. How many of our allies against ISIS will perish? And will President Trump relent and come to their rescue? Chris Mitchell brings us this chilling report on the mounting devastation.
The Turkish army and its allies pounded Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, from the air and the ground. The SDF lost more than 10,000 soldiers fighting ISIS. Now they're once again fighting for their lives and homes. The Turkish invasion includes the Free Syrian Army, jihadist troops who fight alongside Turkey, a NATO member. The Turkish invasion runs all the way across the nearly 300-mile northeast Syrian-Turkish border, from the town of Derek in the east all the way to Kobani in the west. The White House said Turkey had committed to three things: protect civilians, protect religious minorities, including Christians, and ensure no humanitarian crisis takes place. So far, all three have been violated. The fighting is forcing thousands to run for their lives. This woman asked, why did the Americans flee? Many have nowhere to go except the desert. And some humanitarian aid agencies are warning up to 250,000 residents may flee the fighting. Many civilians have been wounded. This is Morris Amsi, Bishop of the Orthodox Syriacs, visiting the wounded from the Turkish invasion. These are some of the others wounded in the past 3 days, including this 10-year-old boy. In a rare move, Syriac church bells in northeast Syria rang out for hours to warn local people to stay in their shelters. The church cried out for the indiscriminate Turkish bombing to stop. President Trump was asked if he would support sanctions against Turkey.
Let's see what happens. We are going to possibly do something very, very tough with respect to sanctions and other financial things.
In the meantime, the fighting goes on. These Christian fighters in the Syrian Democratic Forces visited this church, kissed the Bible, and headed back to the front lines to defend their homeland against the Turkish invasion. In a tweet, President Erdogan said he would like to kiss the foreheads of the heroes of the Mohammedan army.
Chris is with us right now. The president says, well, we will observe this for a while and see how it goes. Why did President Erdogan call his army a Mohammedan army, Chris?
Well, Pat, he's calling it a Mohammedan army because they see this as a jihad. You know, we've talked about that pro-Erdogan newspapers saying that the army of Mohammed is coming against the unbelievers. We talked about Thursday prayers in mosques all over Turkey, concourse prayers from the Quran. We also talked about Afrin. And, Pat, Afrin is so important because what happened in March of 2018 was jihadist troops, along with the Turkish army, they invaded Afrin, hunted Christians, burned churches, and ethnically cleanse hundreds of thousands of Kurds. This is the model of what's happening right now. So I think we need to look at that as a model. And also, you know, Pat, this is just what many of the people are saying, that this is the kind of thing that's going to happen. Erdogan himself said in the United Nations they want to have up to 2 million Syrian refugees come into this region. Now, Pat, the reason is not that they want to necessarily resettle those people, but they want to displace and ethnically cleanse all the people in this so-called security zone along the Syrian northeast Turkish border.
Well, what is this business about? Well, they've agreed not to harm civilians, not to harm religious minorities. I mean, this was a lie, wasn't it?
Exactly. That's what the White House put as a statement. That's what Turkey had committed to protect religious minorities, including Christians, not to create a humanitarian crisis and not to harm civilians. All those things have happened in just the last 3 days. And, Pat, I think it's important to realize that you know, the ISIS prisoners that had been talked about, that was something that was agreed to by the president of Turkey, Erdogan, and by President Trump. And we have a graphic right now, I think we can talk about that, about Al-Hol and Al-Ahrisha. These are the two main ISIS camps. On October 6th, President Trump, the White House made a statement that Turkey was going to take care of all the prisoners captured in the last 2 years. But the Turkey 2 days later said, 2 days into the campaign, said that they were going to only take care of the ISIS prisoners along the so-called security zone. And what he means by that is the percentage is a difference of tens of thousands of ISIS prisoners. So a lot of people think that President Erdogan actually may have lied or deceived or misled President Trump in this whole idea about ISIS prisoners, because certainly Turkey is not committed to take care of the more than 70,000 ISIS prisoners and their families that are there in northeast Syria.
Chris, Erdogan is a thug. He has killed his own army leaders. He's killed the leaders of the opposition party. Now he's being invited to the White House. Well, what do you think about all this?
Well, it's a tragedy right now. We see this happening. People had warned President Trump about this for months, actually, when he first was going to decided to pull out in December of 2018. But Pat, on the sort of the good news and on the diplomatic front is really there's a lot of action going on. I talked to someone that was in one of the European parliaments yesterday. He said there's a whole rethink going on within European parliaments. There's talks about resolution to actually have take Turkey out of NATO. There's sanctions, as he said, all over the place. Finland has decided not to sell arms to Turkey right now. We have the Arab League meeting tomorrow. Then they're condemning this action, too, by Turkey. We have the U.S. resolution by Senators Graham and Van Hollen would impose sanctions. And, Pat, I think the most important thing, and this is what I'm hearing from people in northeast Syria, is U.S. evangelical leaders like yourself who have spoken out against this move. And if they continue to speak out about this, that's what they're looking for. And especially tomorrow is an actually important day, Pat. It's the Value Voters Summit, and President Trump is going to be there. Pastor Andrew Brunson is going to be there. And what they're looking for President Trump, partly because he has been misled by President Erdogan, is impose a no-fly zone up to the Syrian-Turkish border. That would be invaluable to the Syrian Democratic Forces that are literally fighting for their lives right now.
Well, thank you. Well, Lindsey Graham is coming on this program in another couple of days. He's going to be on Wednesday, I think. He's very exercised about this thing. And do you think sanctions will make any difference in terms of Erdogan?
Well, I think there's going to have to be sort of a critical mass of political pressure against the Erdogan government. And if it comes from so many fronts, the Europeans, the Arab League, the U.S. Congress, it could reach a tipping point. The no-fly zone, as I mentioned, Pat, is really critical sort of to get Erdogan's attention, too. It could be, you know, finally something that would tip the military balance right now. And also, I heard just recently, just in the last few minutes, Pat, actually Turkish forces may have fired near U.S. and Syrian Democratic Forces position. But it remains to be seen what's going to tip that balance against President Erdogan. But I think, as I said, the no-fly zone might be the thing that really gets his attention about this military invasion into northeast Syria.
Chris, Iran says 2 missiles hit one of its tankers in the Red Sea. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I can tell you it happened right off of Jeddah, right off of the Red Sea, off the Saudi Arabian coast. It's really unique, Pat. It's just a few weeks ago, on September 14th, that's when Iran hit Saudi Arabia's largest oil processing facility. We were actually in Riyadh when that happened. So it appears like it could be retaliation for that attack. It seems to be a small attack compared to what Iran had done. But it also raises the temperature here in the Middle East. It's already at a boiling point, actually over the boiling point with this war between Turkey and the Syrian Democratic Forces. We'll see what happens, whether Iran may retaliate against Saudi Arabia. We'll see what happens there. But the main thing, obviously, is the battle line between the Syrian Democratic Forces, Turkey, and the Christians, Yazidis, religious minorities that are literally in the crossfire. And that's why one thing they're asking for, Pat, too, is please pray for us, pray for our safety, pray for our protection, and pray that this genocide, potential genocide against them, would be stopped.
Chris, one last question. We have abandoned the Kurds who fought so bravely. They've lost so many men. Do you think other nations will now trust the United States or have suspicion about us?
Pat, that's one of the most important points about this whole operation is if the U.S. is allied with anybody around the world, can they be trusted? You know, will they stand around just for 3-4 years while it serves the U.S. interests and then abandon U.S. allies when it doesn't serve our particular purpose? I think that's one of the things that we hopefully will not go into the future, because the U.S. needs people around the world to know that the U.S. will keep their word. Unfortunately for the Kurds, this is a historical thing, as we said not too long ago, that the Kurds have a saying that the only friends they have are the mountains. But they're hoping that things can be turned around, that this could be reversed, and once again, the U.S. will stand behind their good ally in the battle against ISIS for these many years.
Thank you, Chris. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm familiar with the Kurds. They're wonderful people. They have a wonderful democratic form of government. They share our views about free enterprise and all the rest of it. And we have abandoned them. And the president says, no, I haven't abandoned them. Yes, he has. They're being butchered in a jihad by a Muslim leader from Turkey who says, we are carrying out the army of Muhammad, and we're going to destroy the armies of the infidels. It's enough to chill you, doesn't it? Well, here at home, while blazing wildfires are raging in California, other western states are being buried in snow. Jennifer Wishon brings us this.
This Southern California neighborhood just outside of LA, up in flames like a matchbox. Dozens of mobile homes destroyed.
This fire just completely went out of control.
It started when trash being hauled caught fire. The driver dumped it alongside a road.
Oh, man.
Raging winds quickly spread the embers from there.
My daughter came running into our bedroom screaming the hill is on fire.
And controversy due to dangerous winds. Several utility companies, including the region's largest, Pacific Gas and Electric, cut power to some 2 million customers from the San Francisco Bay to wine country.
As heavy winds blow trees and branches across power lines, the companies say turning off the power prevents sparks that could ignite fires.
If there's any sparks that are derived from our lines, we run the risk of starting a fire.
And as high winds continue, more forced power outages are possible. Farther north and across the center of the country, a completely different picture. From Spokane down to Denver and back up to Fargo, snow. Less than 3 weeks into autumn. Forecasters predict a foot or more will blanket the Dakotas through today.
Kind of crazy, pretty early.
In Denver Thursday, temperatures plummeted from 80 degrees to 30. At the airport, 100 flights were canceled, hundreds more delayed.
This morning before I left home, I put the chains in and the shovel and the ice scraper, just in case.
A good idea since blizzard-like conditions could persist through the beginning of the weekend. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's more typical of this time of year, but to be buried under several feet of snow is kind of unpleasant at this particular time.